Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Beautifully Broken podcast. We are here today with my very good friend, Christine Dionese. Do you say Dionese or Dionese?
If you're in Sicily, you're saying DNA-C, but if, here you are, you say Dionese.
Dionese. Good morning. How you doing today?
Awesome. I'm
I have been,
pumped.
you're so pumped. I've been looking forward to this podcast for a long time. We were waxing about our podcast backgrounds, and I was mentioning I've got these plants that I am testing. We're going to use a quantum device on one and some hydrogen, water, and Brown's gas. And then I have a control plant. And I'm always interested how energy influences organic material. And you mentioned you were doing some of the same.
With Lila Quantum, so they've got the quantum blocks, which a lot of people are familiar with, but they have the IO upgrade service for your entire home, your plants, your pets. And so I'm singling out some plants here because my plants are doing incredibly well. I want to see what is better. What's a measure of better?
I love that. We have to put these things to the test. I was saying to a friend yesterday that I feel very full of information and data and knowledge, and I'm feeling called to work with people, to see 3 to 4 clients a week, to put my belief system on a body and see what is what. I've always done that to some degree, but it's been coming up for me that the gap of me getting my hands on someone and really holding someone accountable or seeing how this information sits on their body, is there an upgrade? And I'm like, I need to do this on some level. Do you ever feel like that you're like, oh, I gotta put this on a body to see how it fits?
Oh, absolutely. I've always had one foot in the research door, one foot out in the world with my clients. And they just kind of giggle when I have these discussions with them. They're going, gosh, Christine, you want to account for so many different variables. And I'm just curious from an integrative perspective, what's moving the needle most? Or is there one little thing that could just set the trajectory in an entirely different direction, right? This is why I love combining all these different frequency therapies.
It's powerful. I was listening to Peter Attia yesterday talk about his new longevity book, and he was mentioning how he was very resistant on the benefit of saunas for a while. And in his head, he's like, people don't account for the variables. Human beings going in a sauna have a level of income and an allotted time of leisure to be able to go in a sauna. So how do you not play that out over 90 years and say that's part of the rhetoric? Now, he's since seen so much data coming from Finland and Norway. He's like, it's really hard to deny these longevity benefits.
We just look over to Europe and ask, what have they been doing for 200 to 500 years? And let's face it, yes, here we're talking about a certain demographic, how people are able to spend, but over there, saunas have not always been fancy. They didn't cost $5,000. So people have been doing this out in nature, and then they brought it into their homes, and then they brought it into their community. So it wasn't just one sauna per house. We're talking about people together, which is another variable, how people live their lives, right? And saunaing together makes a huge difference.
It really does. And it's funny you're bringing this up. I was on with an entrepreneur this morning who has a beautiful barrel sauna that feels, I'm very frugal. It feels like a stretch for me. And at the same time, the sauna has ice in it and it sits 6 people and it's a barrel sauna. And then we add in the idea that Texas is on this kind of funky electrical grid. And he sort of just wound up as a referral on the phone. And he was like, bro, we need to get you one of these. Let's get one in your house. And I was like, I think I'm saying yes.
They're really cool. You're going to obviously have people with you enjoying it. So
That's the house I've created. The house yesterday on Friday, I do a Frequency Friday. We had 19 people here doing amp coils and Flowpresso and Brown's gas. And I have a 1 person, you can get 2 in there, but I have a 1 person sauna. And I was like, I kept looking at it and thinking to myself, this doesn't work. And I'll often go to an imperfect sauna experience at the community gym, which is, we could argue it's dirty electricity and maybe not the ideal temperature, and it's in a pool area, so it's just, you can feel the chlorine hitting the prefrontal cortex. For those of not in the belief system that chlorine is not the best thing for your brain, Google that one. It's a very powerful neurotoxin. But I'll often do that because I want to be around other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really magical, the conversations that come up in these communal places. And what does it mean for you, the aspect of community in healing? Where does it sit in the paradigm?
It's a funny question to ask me, because if you were listening to conversations that I have with my astrologer, who's also my spiritual advisor, Danny Beinstein, she says, you're an alien. Just, you have to accept it. And you're a projector, human design. You're going to need your own alone time. But when you wake up and you want to share these ideas that you're so passionate about, you have to walk out your door and get out there and be with people. So it's easy for me to say, well, we're quantum. I don't necessarily need to do that. But with 80% of the world being generators, a different type of human design that I am, that is what they need. They need to be among one another, human to human. And so I think it's vital for all of us to be really aware of who we are instead of human doingness, human beingness. First, become aware of who you are, your human design, these little nuance things. And then you get to attend to your community with more awareness. You're contributing on a way that's super thoughtful. So it could be just a casual conversation that you have at the coffee shop and then you go home to work in your office all day. Or it could be, the most energy I'm going to give today is with you on this podcast. And then I'm going to go into my office cave and do projector things. So I think it's vital and essential and wonderful and beautiful and satisfying and all of those things.
That helps bring clarity for me. We're some minutes into this podcast and I haven't really said, who is Christine Dionese? If we were crossing each other on the street. Now, I want to preface to say, when I have a deep spiritual question that is related to health, that it's really on my heart, and I have a few people, I have 4 or 5 people that I consider my go-tos. You're on my list, that I just so deeply respect your opinion and the work that you've done to educate, the self-work that you've done with you and your family. And so I'd love to hear your explanation of what you do. I hate to say, what's your label? But if you could illuminate us.
Thank you for asking. I've been in the healing space for a really long time, since I was a kid. And it's kind of like in the show White Lotus, when I forget their character names, but one of them asks, so what's your life story? And she says, well, I was born in San Francisco. And he goes, oh, we're starting at the very beginning. It's hard to not start at the beginning to say what you do. How about this? I've always been in environmental medicine, helping show people your environment influences you. And that's the magic of life. You get to decide how you want your environment to influence you. So today I practice epigenetic medicine through the guise of helping people upgrade any part of their lives by transforming their beliefs. So I call my clients epigenetic upgraders. It means that you get to choose how your life is going to go based on what you expose yourself to. And I got into all of this way, way, way back when I was studying psychology at Nazareth College in Rochester, New York, where we're both from. I was studying psychology. I was really deeply immersed in the world's religions and philosophies. And at that time, my lifelong friend and mentor, Jim Cervelloni, he was teaching me naturopathic medicine. We were at his health food store. We were doing these incredible consultations that other MDs and health practitioners in the community weren't doing. So people would just flood in the door. So I had all this cool psychology and philosophy and world spirituality and religions that I was studying at the same time as learning naturopathic medicine. And it just became so abundantly clear to me that it's such a choice. And going back to what you asked me a few minutes ago, do we need to be in community? What does that represent? Absolutely. So acquire more labels over the years. What does Christine do? She's an epigenetic upgrader. I help people transform their lives and live life on their own terms. And so I use human design, neuroimmunological, neuroendocrine medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, hardcore genetics, epigenetics, all of that through the lens of biological medicine, New German medicine. So it's a true hodgepodge of integrative medicine that I'm practicing. But really, I meet people where they are. When you come to me, I want to know who you are out in the world. Who's Freddie? Before I throw all my fancy labs and tests at you. Because what matters most is how you're living your life, how you were raised, what your perceptions are about what your world is. And then we get into the more nitty gritty about, all right, how's your environment influence you? Let's get some labs, let's get some data. Let's put these things to the test and see. So Christine is a epigenetic upgrader. I practice epigenetic medicine at the belief level.
I love that. I have also heard you use the term a concierge, a medical concierge, which I really enjoyed because I have felt, say that again.
That's business, Christine.
That's business, Christine, but it resonated with me. It resonated with me. I know depending on where you're coming at this from, depending on the upgrade you want or the pain that exists in your life, which you need to navigate around. I really like the idea of a concierge. Lately, I've been really into the term Sherpa. If you've ever done research into the country of Nepal and navigating Everest, you have these just sage-like guides that are native to the community that are so, if I don't know if you've ever seen the Sherpas from Nepal, they're so cute and their smile, and then they look half the size of an American. They're 4 times as strong.
Well, they really
They're
resonate
just
with me. I can get on their level eye to eye.
yeah. It is very powerful. This had the experience lately. I go back to this term of fullness and needing to put it on a human being or let some of it out of my body to diminish my bias. And the idea of a guide or a Sherpa or a concierge is there's something freeing about that to me when I'm working with another human being, because a lot of my intuition on where to guide someone comes from the interplay, our interrelation. I don't know if that resonates with you.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's first about your story, who you are, how you're living your life. And when you say you're meeting someone where they are, what that means for me as a guide and a Sherpa is I'm listening to the language you're using. What are your values? What are you giving meaning to? My mentor that I mentioned a few minutes ago, Jim Cervelloni, he would always say to me, you put the mean in meaning. And that's cute, right? That really resonates with people. You put the mean in meaning, how you give meaning to your reality. And how do you give meaning to your reality? It's based on what your parents, your priests, your grandparents, the churches, etc., taught you. And then you get to kind of pause and look back in reflection with me. And I ask you, are those your beliefs? Are those your values? And people go, well, yeah, of course they are. You go, are you sure? And you kind of ask people to prove it to themselves. And sometimes they can't, right? They realize that they've been making meaning of their reality based on other people's conditions, other people's values, what other people have given meaning to. So it's a really interesting opportunity to meet people where they are, learn their story and what has shaped it, and then say to someone, oh, so you're identifying with some disease state, thyroid concern, cancer, whatever you're calling it. Well, did you know that your beliefs are manifesting on the physical plane? What you give meaning to, what you've assigned value to, has been a multi-generational story. And that's who you are and where you are in this very moment. And so what you're saying, gosh, I feel like I need to be in community, and this idea of concierge to really meet people at this level, it's a journey. It really is. And if you just meet a practitioner, they run your labs, they say, hey, here's what we're going to do. It feels a little intrusive. It's nice to let down your hair, be listened to, like the Sherpa does. Let's face it, when you're climbing Everest, suddenly you need to go to the bathroom and it might be number 2. And here you are faced with needing to get really personal with somebody, right? And so it's holding this different level of space. And I ask people to commit to a year to be with me in this concierge space. But I joke, we're going to become old friends because I spend years and years and years doing this kind of work with people. And some years it's all about talking. Other years it's about doing labs because they're ready to detoxify. They're ready to let go of how they had given meaning to whatever the disease state was. Whatever they were getting from that, identifying in that way, they're ready to get something else and create a new story. And so that's why all of these beautiful tools that we have can come together. So when you ask me, oh, what do you do? That's such a exhilarating question to answer, right? There's so much that comes into fueling and channeling how we're guides with one another. for one another.
There is so much to that question, and I don't love it. I don't love doing it. And in an hour opportunity to meet the world on a podcast, I think it's helpful because not everybody is in on our backstory. So more to come on that. Maybe that's going to evolve for me. I want to just walk back a couple terms, and I never want to assume that the audience is, what does she mean by epigenetic medicine? Can you first define epigenetics and then say how that applies to the field of medicine?
Absolutely. So the way that most of us are sharing the expression of epigenetic medicine is you have genetics, and there's a really great saying, genetics load the gun, epigenetics pull the trigger. So epi means above, and I talk a lot with my hands. So above here, we've got all of these variables coming in from our environment. Epigenetics is how these variables influence our genetic expression. So this is how we give meaning to our reality. Basics: clean water, polluted water, non-GMO, beyond organic foods, low vibration foods, right? Those contain information. And what we choose to consume influences epigenetics. So what's trait expression? You got your mother, your father. They come together to create you, and they have conferred messages to you, DNA coding. So they don't just give you exactly what they have. It's kind of shaken up. It's called recombination of DNA. And then you are the unique being that you are, right? So however they were living their lives up until they conceived you and birthed you, that information is given to you. Now, here you are, born into this world. So you've got their information that they conferred to you and how they have been living their lives. And now you've got the environment that you're living in. And so all of that is this incredible epigenetic information. So what you choose to feed yourself with, from relationships to food to water to air, that's epigenetics. So it was obviously once thought you're dealt whatever. Here you go. Here's your genes. That's your fate. Your fate is sealed. Well, we obviously know that that's not true because certain people are born with cancer and then their children don't develop that cancer. Those are the really obvious things, right? Or you take two twins and you separate them at birth. One is sent to Siberia, one's sent to a beach in California. You can see the magic of epigenetics unfolding, right? Different exposures. So that's a really basic understanding of epigenetics. And the thing is, it doesn't need to get complicated. I think that if we can embrace, oh, the environment influences us, let's accept that and let's create a beautiful life based on that, right?
It certainly does put one back in the driver's seat when it's explained that way. I was listening to someone yesterday. It was a scientist. I was going to share the podcast with you and I didn't. That was just on Andrew Huberman, and they were talking about the DNA and the RNA and how you can almost think within each cell is this, to take, for example, the IKEA manual that has a map to build every single piece of furniture and every element of your house you could ever need. And in each cell is the directions for everything. And then also in there is like the protein to write it. It's like your 3D printer. I've got to make this stuff with something, right? And it just really struck me, within each cell is the schematics, the engineering plans from everything I need in my body. And to not take into consideration or hold weight for that, the hydration of the cell, the heavy metal toxicity or glyphosate, which are nutrient inhibiting elements in our environment, or sexual trauma, emotional trauma, could not have an effect on the expression of this protein, is crazy. And it was in the gym and I was like on the ergonomic ski machine and I'm like skiing away. I'm like, oh, this is crazy. Why don't people know about this?
You did tell me about this and I went and listened to it, and I kind of did a lot of fast forwarding through the beginning, but the part that I thought was most important was discussing memory, inherited memory. They were looking at C. elegans. And of course, it's, oh, let's look at other microorganisms. Well, let's talk about humans, right? Because here we are, life is the clinical study. So when you go through and you read the show notes on that, it's really exciting and it's really inspiring. But then it talks about the limitations to empirical science. Well, we can kind of pull back that idea that there's a limitation and we can be in community with one another and we can start to record case studies among one another. This is why hearing people's stories is so important. I have this book behind me. I can't really reach it. It's by Mark Woolen. It's called It Didn't Start With You. It's kind of like, okay, up here, great grandfather, my dad, they're telling him, he sucks, he sucks. Then my dad's like, you're wonderful. I love you. You're amazing, right? He was the epigenetic upgrader. He stopped right there. So he's the proof that these limitations don't exist. Because what did he do? He remembered something within his heart. All right, if we want to go measure it, we can look at our cells. We can look at what the cell is made of. We can look at what's in the nucleus of the cell. We can look at the nano information in cells these days. So I think it's really important to be sure to tell people, sure, empirical science is limited, but whatever we haven't figured out to call this clinical proof, this everyday walking, talking, remembering, that's what we call it in this community, the remembering data. And be talking about this part more. This is what your Reiki practitioners are doing. They're helping you remember. This is what a psychic is doing. And then we bring a little bit more science into it. We get into your human design, right? That's your Myers-Briggs, biochemistry, genetics, epigenetics. So we are seeing the marrying of all of these different data points. I think it's really time for you to host a podcast where you've got all the different players in the room. Your more psycho-spiritual people with your Hubermans and Sinclairs, and I don't know, I'll jump in the mix and help you field everybody.
Oh, I would love that. It would be a fabulous live event. I do think blending worlds is so powerful because you lose something when you fall into the need to have an expert on, or they're an expert, which means they're highly intelligent in one area, and generally to become the expert, they've had to ignore lots of other viewpoints to do that. So I do think there is a time and a place to integrate these. We're building a bridge between different ponds. Before we go on, I just wanted to mention that there's multiple examples of this, but there's a great study on NIH, National Institute of Health, looking at transgenerational transmissions of stress within human beings. And the really painful experience that we have is the Holocaust. And we can look at different physical disease states that are more prevalent in survivors of that experience. And the numbers are quite profound. There are other examples in which this exists within subsequent generations. But you mentioned to me maybe like 2 months ago that a mentor had told you, Christine, I've released the need for proof or the need to know. Can you remind me of that quote? And it was so profound.
Yeah, it was Danny Beinstein that I had on my podcast. And I take listener questions now before I get on to the podcast. And I said, Danny, I have a lot of listeners who want to know about the science behind astrology. And she knew I was going to ask this question. So I had no idea what she was going to say. And she started to get into the science a little bit. She goes, you know what? Let me back up. This is what I've learned. The burden of proof is not on me. And it was so profound. The burden of proof is not on me. It's not up to me to prove to you that you can change epigenetically. I'm here to plant the seeds. I'm here to bring the horse to water, etc. But it's not up to me. I can't heal you. You already have what it takes within you, right? And so she was just getting into the nuance of the burden of proof is not on me. So what's the proof? It's making a decision to change our minds. And you brought up something just a second ago about the Holocaust. So when I was in med school, I had the incredible opportunity of going and treating Dr. Edie Edger. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's world famous. She lives in La Jolla. And my mentor was working with the military and Dr. Edie Edger at the time on the epigenetics of post-traumatic stress for veterans. And living in San Diego, huge, right? So Dr. Edie Edger, she was in the Holocaust. She doesn't call herself a survivor. She calls herself a thriver. She calls herself something to be celebrated because she made a decision. Now, I haven't looked at her genetics, so I don't know all the bells and whistles, but I know her story. And she made a decision at the time. And she decided that she was going to thrive. So she did what she had to do to make it back, to be able to tell her story. And of course, she talks about working through her trauma, but she's the real deal proof. And so she went on to inspire everybody enough to do the research on post-traumatic stress, enough to get into the cellular science of how we hold on to this information and how we can transform. And back then, a lot of that data is what ended up getting certain other pieces of research paid for. Cell studies on how we hold trauma, cell studies on what else did she do? Cell studies on, oh my gosh, what was the data point? I'm losing it here on exactly what she fielded. But it's something to your point that you were talking about with studies pre and post trauma. Oh, epigenetic trait expression. So different pathways, the methylation pathway, showing that we should be using methylation to show when we've released trauma, because we could see how the methylation cycle is optimized once we've released trauma through different various therapies, talk therapy, frequency therapies, acupuncture in Chinese medicine, bioacoustic therapies. So yeah, that's what it was. So it was actually the military that wanted to do these studies. But anyway, that was a really profound time in my life. And I knew then it's people's stories that make the difference. It's people's stories. It's not testing mice in a lab. It's not looking at things under a petri dish, because that can get kind of boring and static. I do think that some of the scientists that Huberman is chatting with, they're doing some really profound work. And I wish that we could come up with the guy's name right now, because his research is really profound.
Sure. I can look it up. I would also love, you mentioned how we use the methylation process. Can you just walk through again, just for the audience, and explain that in case somebody's new to that term, and how that could be upgraded or downgraded based on genetics and why it's important?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the biohacker community, it's really fun to look at popular genes. Let's talk about BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. We know what it does, right? But when we isolate a gene, it's very allopathic and Western. So before we jump on the bus and we take off from the starting point, we have to back up the bus and start with methylation. Methylation is going to determine how genes express, how genes can be optimized. So methylation, we're either methylating great, over methylating, or under methylating. So methylation is all of our enzymatic processes. It's the information for how we're telling our genes to go and operate, basically. So how we're methylating, that's determined on, what I was talking about earlier when we were born. So what's methylation involved in? Homocysteine. What's homocysteine involved in? How we make neurotransmitters, how we use different proteins, amino acids, and then how all of those biochemicals start to give more information to BDNF, MTHFR, COMT, all of those processes. So it's basically your core enzymatic processes, the information, the set of instructions that's going to allow you to epigenetically upgrade. So it keeps us from putting the horse before the cart, basically. When we look at methylation status, we can go, ooh, you're aging pretty dramatically biologically. Let's slow down that methylation and let's optimize some of those enzymatic factors. And that's what's giving instruction to the rest of the body, how it does all the wonderful things that it does. That's a really basic understanding of it without getting in too crazy.
We could do a methylation podcast, but I think it's helpful to understand, when I hear you do that explanation, I'm reminded of the time an intervention can take to deliver felt and an experiential result as far as somebody who's struggling, right? I don't think that people always understand. You're like, well, if I take this onslaught of B vitamins and methylation support, what does that look like? I think I'm always reminded, there's one of my favorite, I guess I have a chart somewhere, but I'll also Google it. How long does it take each system of the body to regenerate? The retinas, the skin, the nerves, the gut lining, our bone, and looking at the time it would take to repattern the whole body, a net whole new Freddie. And when you think about the thing you're going to add, and maybe it's just, I'm going to wake up and do 45 minutes of sun gazing in the morning. I'm always going to go to bed at the same time, and I'm going to change the quality of water that I drink. Theoretically, just hydration alone, that could have a pretty profound effect, but it may be felt in that next version of myself, which is however many years down the road. Obviously, hydration is going to change quite a bit of functionality right away. So there's other things we can put that on, but I do think it's important just to consider that all the systems of the body, all the different tracks regenerate at a different level. And when there's better materials, better building blocks, and then we have the ability to carry out the instructions better of that next version of me.
Yeah, and we're talking about something really nuanced, methylation. And you bring up hydration. Some people don't even know what it means to hydrate. They think I'm turning on the tap and sucking down some water and backing up and asking, well, what is a cell made of? Before we give it information, let's ask what it's made of. Then we can understand how we nurture it, right? So with hydration, that's just, what are we nutrifying our bodies with and why is the question that I always ask. And when my first years of private practice, the burden of proof was on me. I had decided I was doing something very alternative. So I wanted to prove to people. When you go to school for traditional Chinese medicine, which my formal degree is in, you're also studying allopathic Western medicine. So you go to medical school for traditional Chinese medicine. And back then it was, I need to prove I'm doing. So it was hardcore neuroimmunology, hardcore neuroendocrinology, but you're still putting the horse before the cart when you start there. You have to back up and ask, what am I really doing with all of this information? So when you talk about where to begin, I just think of the nervous system. I'm starting to take this conversation in the nervous system direction.
Great.
Because all of us biohackers, all of us citizen scientists, all of us doctors, all of us researchers, we're so passionate. And if we don't have a basis to begin from, where are we going and why, right? So how about you? When you're talking about how you want to disseminate all of this research, whether it's intellectually talking about it or with the therapies, I imagine that you're having a conversation with people about their nervous system, where life is at. Right. And then that gives you an idea of, ooh, they're probably over methylating. They're probably under methylating.
And just because of the level at which I am, or the conversations I have as a Sherpa right now, it usually, I will always default to the idea, or we can create a shared belief in which, wait, there was a time in which you weren't suffering under chronic rheumatoid arthritis and your spine wasn't fusing and you didn't have brain fog and you were relatively happy. Your body was functioning perfectly well until it wasn't. So let's just remind ourselves that we have a body that self-corrects. And somewhere along the line, you picked up information, whatever that information was, and we changed the expression. So I will often find great empowerment in that we have a self-healing, auto-correcting body with a million processes happening at the same time every second that we don't yet understand. We're in the infancy of how we're understanding this, right? The Petri dish is a great example. That's not, a cell in a Petri dish is not representative of how it exists in the quantum computer that is the body. There's so much more information happening from cell to cell. Just think about how the body is influenced on light alone. Just the light that the body is exposed to. It's incredible. So I will always go back to there. And let's try to remember, let's try to repattern, and talk about this. What happens when a body is in parasympathetic, or rest and digest? I always say parasympathetic, the idea of a parachute attached to the body and it's just slowly gliding down to earth with ease. I feel that. And I am very aware in my recent 2 years, pandemic probably induced that I was like, oh, I catch myself a lot. And I was like, where you are revved up. Now, or we started the podcast with a few deep breaths and you feel like, oh my God, go in for 7, hold for 4, out for 8. How good does that feel? And am I doing that enough? So I'm aware even in my own life that I don't trend towards that state, which is a regenerative healing state. And so for me, To go back into nervous system tone, it's an area in which I can confidently say it's safe for me to advise on. I'm not going to hurt anybody. I know it to complement the energy production in the cell. I know it's going to complement not only yourself, but all the people in your immediate family unit and your community, because you will show up better. That power of pause is it's happening in real time. I'm not so reactive to all the outside stressors.
Absolutely. Lauren from the Biomed Center, one of my friends in college, she called me one day and she said, I have a patient and I can only do one or two things with him today. And he really needs something to optimize his HRV. And he has a lot going on in life. And I didn't even have to think about it. I recommended some of the bioacoustic magnetic frequencies on amp coil to do along with one of my favorite light systems. I use the Lumiceuticals. They're different colors of light in pads. They do solfeggio and Nogier frequencies. And so I didn't ask any questions. She just told me what she told me, and I just knew that that was the nutrition that this person needed. And to your point, he came out, his breathing was regulated. She said, oh, I could just see his face softened and he just looked happy.
Yeah.
That's all that matters sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not the first conversation to talk about your rheumatoid arthritis and your achy joints. It's, oh my gosh, I haven't even stopped to breathe all the way to the bottom of my lungs and out, right? So the fact that she knew that she just needed to do something to help regulate that parachute effect, it was so genius. And I think that's the whole point of meeting people where they are. Why are we giving any advice that we're giving until we start one spot right there?
And I don't know about you, but I found it so important. And so I've had such a calling to better embody the things I talk about.
Absolutely.
To really hold myself accountable for, 3+ miles of walking a day. No-go Paulo. There's no next step out of bed until I gratitude. There is no day. So it's not like, oh, I didn't do it today. It's no, I have a contract with myself that I will be late. I will miss other things. I will fall out of integrity with appointments, but I am going to either gratitude journal or I'm going back to bed. It's huge. It's so big. It's just there's something special about picking up a pen and taking the time to place out the written word for me internally that puts my nervous in a different place. There's this great example of, it's always about, in America, bigger, faster, harder, stronger. And there's this beautiful example. I have a video of dominoes, and it's a 1 ounce domino. And then there's a 3-ton stone, like ting, 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 boom. And you see this thing go, and you're like, oh my goodness, that is the power of a single choice made different. Pretty amazing. It's not power. I see examples of this all the time, Power versus Force, which is a great book that I often pass out. But back to the nervous system and your role in this place. Where do you see that impact in working with people? Like, is that something that you witness to see the redirection of nervous system tone, or the implication of these, pulling in these different lifestyle hacks to reset the nervous system? How do you see it change trajectory?
It's really incredible to witness how this plays out on the body, right? People come to me really are ready to transform. So they have ideas in their mind about what they want to do, sometimes about how they want to do it. And a lot of people, of course, are wanting to put that horse before the cart. And so, like you said before, people need a little bit of patience. But when your nervous system is all revved, that can be challenging. So reminding people of these abilities to self-heal. So constant reminders of it. And having self-check-in and asking people questions about their intuition is a great way to help people connect with joy and satisfaction. This is one of the biggest reasons that I do so much with belief. You can hold people accountable by asking them questions about what they believe in and what they value. And when you find out that what they believe and value was given to them by their parents, and you tell them that they have the ability to create their own values, that actually does this interesting thing. You can literally, I've seen HRV change in the moment when you present this to someone. They take a deep breath in. You could see them getting a little, and sometimes I'll just place my hand on their shoulder if I know them really well, or I'll smile at them and I'll go, you can thank your parents for what they gave you, and it's time to create a new story. And they take a deep breath and they have a detox and they literally take a whole piece of information that's been living inside of them. They breathe. And what do? You see that HRV data. Ooh, you print out that paper and you go, that's what it takes for certain people at first. They do need a little bit of, wow, look, you did that. We did that together. We're a frequency. And I'll tell people, we just did that by talking. We didn't do amp coil. We didn't do lights. We didn't do anything. So that's kind of how I build a baseline with people, showing them that they have this ability from within, and everything on the outside is a bonus. We have all these cool views, right? So it's sort of where I start with a lot of people. If 80% of the world are generated or all amped up, you need to show them something really tangible. And I was just going to say, and then they're ready to put in some of the real work, because people do. They need to be in that parasympathetic phase to even contemplate the idea of that they might need to, that parasite might be holding onto the information about how they were abused or neglected or weren't seen for who they were as a child. You can't go to third base on the first.
Yeah.
I mean, some people can, but you know what I mean? So in biological medicine, I mean, what I've learned from biological medicine from, Dr. Tom, Dr. Droba, all of those guys, it's that you have to prepare the body to receive. You have to prepare the body to heal. And that's why it's so important to start with the nervous system. Some of us practitioners move faster or slower than one another, but when you're talking to people who are calling in a big level transformation, it has to be about healing the nervous system, priming the nervous system.
Yeah. The terms Western medicine, functional medicine, and biological medicine, what comes up for you is the difference between those?
Biological medicine is the container that holds allopathic, Western, functional within it. I wish I had the diagram in front of me. Actually, can I show a book?
Sure you can.
This book right here, Bioregulatory Medicine. It's written by those guys I was just talking about, Dr. Droba, Dr. Tom, Odell, great guys. And they talk about, well, what makes up biological medicine? And it's completely integrative, completely holistic, psychospiritual, allopathic, Western. It basically creates awareness and acknowledges that we have a root and a branch. We might get in a car accident. Allopathic is great for that, to treat frontline trauma, right? So sure, we need it for those reasons. Functional medicine, I think, is just a dress rehearsal for becoming a biological medical practitioner, basically. They're really steeped in allopathic and Western, and they're trying to get to the more integrative, holistic picture of functional. And I think functional medicine is taking on new meaning. Like I look at Dr. Will Cole, and he's addressing a lot about trauma and our lived experiences. And he does start with parasympathetic. So I think that he's already practicing biological medicine, even though he says he's practicing functional. When I was first in practice, that's what I did. I practiced functional medicine, and I realized, I'm doing all these other things too. And I didn't know that I was practicing biological medicine by bringing in the psychospiritual, the epigenetic, et cetera. That's kind of how I think of it. Does that
That's
resonate?
Great. Completely. I'm beginning to understand and listen to more authors and watch more webinars and just understand the conversation better. My experience with biological medicine, until really I met you, had been I would have a friend or two be on death's door. So they would eventually find Dr. Rao in Switzerland, correct? And so they would get on a plane and they would go to peristalsis, and they would try to recover from just devastating neurological Lyme disease, and really with a mixed bag of results. And so I always had an opinion or a taste in my mouth of it that was not great, only because I would watch, and again, this is just like the 4 or 5 families that I would watch have no other option, and all of a sudden there's stories of hope from overseas. So in a very American way, they pack up their bags and they pool their funds together and they go over, assuming when you leave there in a month, you're cured. and not realizing that there's an incredible amount of work to do after. So I understand the limitations of American psychology, which the quarterback gold star mentality is problematic in healing. It really is forcing it. So I'm the more I learn about it, the more I understand why you drink the weird mossy soups and why you eat a certain way and why there's the different temperature therapies to put the body back into a state where it can receive these immunotherapies and the injections of mistletoe. And it's fascinating. And I do get it. It's such a different conversation we're having with the body and the body's nervous system.
And it's
Then,
evolving. Biological medicine is rooted in European philosophy, and it's informed as we evolve, right? So,
yeah.
what we've been able to do here in the US with biological medicine, the way that we've been able to expand on it and start bringing together the biohacking community, bringing together more of the psycho spiritual. I think it'll still be called biological medicine for a long time, but we've really evolved how we're doing it because biological medicine, to a certain degree, can be a little standardized. But here in the US, one thing that I think we're doing really, really well is seeing people for who they are, and we're curating and we're personalizing because we're acknowledging we've really fucked ourselves up over all these multi generations, and we need to hold a different level of space for people to detox from so much. And so, biological medicine, it's not medicine, it's a lifestyle, right? And so,
Yes.
season by season, sure, there's certain things that we're doing. In the winter, we're more contemplative, right? And as we emerge from winter, we take the best of the new information, and then we've prepared our bodies to be ready to be able to detox from what no longer serves. And so there, of course, are these things that these practices that we're going to do season by season. Some seasons, are about rest and retest, as Dr. Drobot says. Spring is about, okay, we tested, we proved to you, all the great work you've been doing. We're showing you your body's ready. Ready, it's time to go. And then by spring, you're super activated and you're young and you get to take in all these cool biohacking therapies because your body's just a magnet to receive these things. So by the time you get to winter, you could be the best philosopher in the world. You're so ready to contemplate. And that is actually when people springboard into their next spring, like a new person. It's so incredible to witness. So biological medicine is definitely this evolving container, but in season by season, it's about evolution for sure.
I am reminded how powerful the tools are that I have in my home, like the amp coil and an ozone machine and the Flowpresso, and I've got all the tools. And to just reference the idea that I'm putting it on people, I can always make a shift, usually a very profound shift. But if you go back to the patterns and if you don't understand the why, and as you said, do you understand, your internal voice or what your heart wants? And maybe it's what your parents wanted. If we never do that work, I watch this all the time. People, they fall back in. And then the narrative becomes, well, this didn't work for me, or it didn't call in the healing that I wanted. Not always. And God, there was this great pictograph yesterday I saw of all the colors in a circle. I can't bring it up on my phone because oh wait, maybe I can bring it up on my phone. It was really beautiful. Is this? No, I don't have it on my phone. But it was just like in nature doesn't do binary. Nature exists on a spectrum, and it can be incredibly beautiful and it can be violent, the way nature exists. But I'm reminded of like this ability that when we have so many great tools and so the science and the technology, we can always make the shift. But the long-term behavior change, the long-term shifts and holding these new patterns is existent on rewriting the story. And I've got one of the most rock star practitioners in Austin. His name's Caleb Greer. He's a nurse practitioner, and it's one of the better interviews I've ever done. And I was like, tell me, you've got the transcranial magnetic stim, the blue cube, you have all the machines, hard-shelled hyperbaric chambers. And I was like, give me the modality in which is most profound in creating shift in a human being. And he was just like, mental, emotional, interrelating. He's like, he loves the Jordan Peterson's writing suite, self-authoring suite of writing out your story. He's like, I have to know your version of your story, because from that, I'm going to draw out. And then we're going to apply biochemistry and the genetics and all the other things. It was just really refreshing that people are building this into a model.
Everyone's talking about it, Freddie.
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah,
mean, it's just,
you
it's
go.
so profound and basic at the same time, right?
It is.
To
Yeah.
think that what was I telling one of my patients? Do you ever play with color forms when you were a child? You know what those are?
No.
It's a scene on a piece of cardboard, and then the color form is where you're changing the scenery around. But usually the background would be nature. It would be a forest. It would be, at the ocean or in outer space. And you're stamping on the little color form, which is usually a person, your pet. You're moving things around. And it's almost like people think that they're somehow detached from outer space or the forest, etc. And like you said, nature can just be like flowing down the lazy river or violent like an avalanche. But we are part of that. The same thing is going on within us. And so this nervous system thing, when you're having these initial conversations with people, it's a level of acceptance that you want to bring them to. So
Yeah.
they realize exactly what they're made of. And I
Yeah.
think if people realize exactly what they're made of, to your friend's point, then you can really use the story to heal and show people you've created this insane like so vibrant. You're 10 chapters deep in this story with all these characters. Why don't we send these characters off in a different direction? The one that you are actually manifesting in your mind, the one that you want, instead of thinking we have to go down this doom and gloom story. So
Yeah.
let's feed that story to your nervous system. And
Yeah.
people will look at you like, okay, I mean, I'm slightly willing to accept that. And then 3 weeks later, a month later, they're like, I'm starting to, I feel a little different. I think I want to do this. So it takes people sometimes 1 to 3 months to even decide that they're willing to take the risk.
Yeah.
And I can't believe still to this day, people have to think about taking the risk to heal. But gosh, people just still don't know yet. We have to keep sharing with them and showing them we're practicing this medicine. This is how we live our lives. We've made it a lifestyle. It's possible for them.
Yeah, the lifestyle is I want to touch on one more thing just because we didn't get into it. And you've mentioned a couple of times 80% of the world is their generator,
Yeah.
human design. So can you just say how human design is a tool which you're a fan of, which I'm just starting to dip my toe in the water. How you would describe that to somebody when you're talking generator, you're a manifest generator.
Yeah, I like human design. It really is very integrative. It brings together everything that we've discussed today. So if you're embarking on it, you need to know what time you were born, what city you were born in, and you're going to use that information. Oh, what time you're born. You're going to use that information to plug in to a system that uses information about biochemistry, your chakras, Myers-Briggs, the I Ching. So it's this conglomeration of information that is helping you understand who you came here to be, not what you're here to do, but who you came here to be. And when you know who you came here to be, it's all about living a life, about I'm a human being, not a human doing. And so when you use these systems,
Yeah,
identify through what's my human design.
I'm sort of
I'm a
giggling
projector,
because
I'm a generator, I'm a manifestor, I'm a manifesting generator. Oh, and then there's reflectors too. And the memes are hilarious. It's always, a projector just needs to get a couple text messages about going out for the night, and that's excitement enough, and they're totally fine with joy of missing out. Where a generator absolutely has to show up at the club, go to after hour, wake up at 6 a.m. to go out for breakfast. So it starts to give meaning to, oh, this is why I always felt that way. When I'm talking about identifying, values, when we sit there and go, wow, that was my priest's value. That was my mother's value. Those beliefs came from my teacher. And it turns out that they're a generator and I'm a projector. And I thought that I was doing it all wrong for all those years, that I needed to prove to other people I was qualified to doctor you. I was qualified to do research. I was qualified to give you advice. Oh, and by the way, I was going to spend 15 hours a day doing that. And then, I can't imagine why I have chronic fatigue and I don't want to go out with my friends on the weekend. So human design is so nuanced based on this integrative picture, and it helps give meaning to who you are and how you do life. So it's a different set of instructions. It even incorporates genetic code. So I'm a projector. My husband is a generator, and he'll just come flying in the door and want to tell me the whole story, all the details, and it's like this. And I'm sitting there going, hold on a sec, I'll be right back. Take a deep breath. Projectors are leaders, but from a minimalist perspective. We're not about the doingness. We're about leading people to drink from the well, inspiring people, and helping people create new structure and new meaning. We're generators. They are going to be people who can help us overcome old institutions and old dogma and uproot that and build the new systems, because they literally have the wherewithal to do it. Those are the people who wanted to stay at the club until 3 a.m. when they were younger.
Yeah.
So they're built to do that. Reflectors are here to show the world, to be the mirror. But they, when they're being their non-selves, they can take on everything from other people. So their job is to continually detail and be very aware of their nervous systems and what they need to be nutrified by. So I always root into human design with people, because they are doing life according to other people's terms. And I'll ask you, why are you doing that? And they'll go, well, I mean, that's what I was taught. Okay, well, could you be doing it a different way? I ask. And they'll go, I don't know, maybe. So I ask them, what are you getting from doing life this way? And then they joke and they're like, oh, I'm kind of tired and I don't have a great sex life and I'm overworked. And they start to name all the things that they don't want to be getting, right? So in human design, it's about being yourself, who you came here to be. But most of us until then, we're operating under our non-selves. So it's really interesting to unpack the science of who we are. Yeah. And for those people who still need proof, they can root into the biochemical, the genetic, side of things. And for people who are more into the psycho-spiritual, they'll get into the I Ching and, get into the other side of things. There's way in.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think it's funny. There was a time in the last few minutes where your mic had froze and I talked, then you jump back in, and I was like, "Oh, she's not done." If we heard that, everybody giggle along with us, because the perfection of imperfection on a podcast. I was giggling because I'm looking, and this always blows my mind, is how spot on some of these descriptors are for manifest generator. Like the first time I read it, it sort of blew my mind. Manifest generator archetypes are multi-passionate, multi-hyphenate individuals with a ton of varying interests and lots of energy. And I was just like, who is that? That's me.
Absolutely.
Like
the human design. That's always fun.
I got the app that you told me to get. I've had like a sign-in issue. So I was like, I'm going to buy this app. And I loaded it on my dad's. It's like, unlock the clues, Freddie, on your app. It's like, I've loaded up on my phone. So I'm going to jump in and really explore what that means for my body and how I can better use that tool. But my question, this is another podcast. How is the information laid out in time through the stars, through your birth date, through your birth city, through your birth time, and reflective in how I am as it blows my mind. It truly is. You're like, okay, this is the matrix, because you read enough of these things. You're like, that's exactly spot on for that person.
Yeah. And Danny Beinstein, when she said on my podcast, the burden of proof is not on me, what she really meant was, it's written in the stars. It's written in the stars. There it is. If you take 10 astrologers and you ask them a core question, they're looking to the stars.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about what's empirical and what's not, that's relative, frankly, right? And so if I look at you and I'm like, wow, you're living your life this way, and this guy's living his life that way, and this one's living his life that way, I can clearly see your human design. I guess, how is it? You're just talking about human design right now, but how is it for DNA? How is it for anything else? Right? So it's nano. It's quantum. That's honestly the answer to all of this. Because what are we doing now that we couldn't do before, or we didn't know that we could do? We work with multi-generations, and we literally change genetic expression. And we have the tools to observe that. We have our friends and go, wow, you seem like a different person. Okay, we have that. But we literally have this information that shows us when we go from living life from our non-selves to ourselves, right, through the lens of human design, we can measure that on a DNA test. We can literally see that genetic trait expression has shifted. That is so wild and cool to me that we have this trajectory of information and where data is crossing, right? So, how we're living our life and the way it's unfolding, and then the way that we're conferring this information to our offspring. Oh my God, that is just so incredible to me. And we have the data to keep showing it and showing it. It's nano, it's quantum.
Yeah.
Atomic.
Yeah.
It's just the cheesy, we're all made of the dust of stars. It's true. We can measure it and show it.
Yeah. That's incredible. Yes. I don't believe woo woo, but your head starts to spin once in a while. You're like, oh my God, what are we doing here? Which is helpful for me to define once in a while.
Sure.
What am I doing, or what am I trying to? The funny thing is, it's like my dad's generation or his dad's generation. He needed to build something that would make its mark on the world, that would last for air quote ever, which now seems silly to me. I was like, nothing lasts forever. Nobody's building anything. There's no empires. There's no company. There is no legacy.
Mm-hmm.
In the grand scheme of time, why didn't we used to ask our seedless questions before we told our kids that you need to work for the family business or you are fucking our lineage? Because it wasn't verbal, but I'm Fred the Fifth who left the Kimmel Company, which was the biggest mechanical engineering firm in upstate New York. And that's what the Freds did. They were inventors and engineers and mechanics, and they were a systems people. But when I decided to not work for my family, and I decided to jump on a bus or have my friend drive me down to New York City with $300 because I needed to sing on Broadway, and I was like, well, this sounds really fun. The working off Ridge Road in Brockport, New York does not light me up inside.
Neither me.
Yeah, there was some, there was understandably, but there was judgment and there was resentment and there was anger. And, I didn't even talk. I was saying this yesterday. There were parts of my family I don't talk to anymore. And that was another message that is like, family is blood, family first, always family. I have found throughout my life that I am a happy, exploding human being because I have created boundaries with certain blood relatives. And then I don't mean that in a way of judgment. I just mean you sit there and you have a A-B conversation. It's not B, 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 B. And you're like, I'm totally good with this. Mm-hmm. This burden is not on me to heal this relationship. So I'm going to go cultivate a life elsewhere.
When I first started practicing, my neuroscience professor and I shared an office, and he said, Christine, all relationships are negotiable, even the ones with your family. And that really stood out to me because I'm Italian, and I have had a very celebratory experience of family relationships not being negotiable. That wasn't even something that I ever really thought of. So, that really took on meaning for me, or I gave it meaning. And I really started listening to people's stories differently. And I found some stuff in my own family story that I didn't really like and, healed through that. But by and large, it's true, right? All relationships are negotiable. And what you just said about boundary, putting the things in place to give meaning to what matters most to you. It's funny that you described your family as engineers and systems peoples and inventors, because that is what you're doing.
Yes.
You're highly innovative. Obviously, you're just sharing that gift, along a different trajectory. But to answer, you weren't asking me this question, but to answer the question of why am I even here, right? Reeling ourselves in. Some of us don't need an intellectual answer for that. There's just an inner knowingness that we're to be here now. And there doesn't need to be an intellectual explanation. It's an inner knowingness. That's really cool. And that's how I sort of make joy out of being here now, not staying stuck in the past and not creating too much future, just having fun, being in joy, being satisfied.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to say that I feel called to say, I deeply, I love my family. Like, I love my family on all levels and all imperfections and all nuances. And it's really interesting to explore, what I have like it's on the now, but I have no idea what the future holds. Who knows how that relationship evolves? And, I have the best parents in the world. And truly, I always think back on this when I woke up in the hospital in Rochester and they were like, "You're full of cancer." My whole family, my whole big Rochester family was like, they were packed, the little pre-surgery waiting room. Like everybody was in there. And every big surgery I had, they were all, they would come to the waiting room at Strong and they would wait for me and they would take turns visiting. And just like there is just unconditional love there that is beautiful in those family ties that bind. But I want to add that for the family members that don't listen to this podcast.
Wow, that's really sweet. You are a lover of,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love meeting you. We didn't talk about how we met, but it was really cool how we met and didn't know we were from the same place, the same age, born in the same month. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, it really was. We met at I always want to say the Biohacking conference. Why can't we just settle on a name? The Upgrade conference, Dave Asprey's event.
Yeah.
And we figured out that you were from Churchville, Chile.
Yeah.
You went to school in Churchville, Chile. I went to school in Holly. We played each other's soccer teams. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that we were playing each other's soccer teams and we were probably both the same field.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
It's wild.
I'm glad we decided to get on the bus. You went to New York City, I went to California, and we met because we're epigenetic upgraders and we decided to listen to that inner voice and go for it. And now we're showing people that it's just possible for them too.
Yeah, I certainly believe it is possible. And man, I'm feeling really called to do this life book work suite and write out my story as of late, as I'm going some time commitments in which I'm shifting up how I'm spending my time on the planet. I'm very, very excited and facilitating the connections which are allowing me to explore new things. Vague booking. That's like a vague statement.
Really, my thank you towards you is for being such an incredible citizen scientist creating this lifestyle. It's so huge. It just, oh my gosh, it is. I tell everybody about you, what you're doing, and how you've helped open up this conversation. You've got one foot in the research door, you've got one foot in the life door, and you're showing it all coming together. So thank you for creating the space for all of us to even have these conversations and share them. An incredible multiplier effect.
Thank you. And Christine, where can people learn more about your work and follow you or become exposed to what you're doing online?
Thanks for asking. So people can come to @WellExamined and follow along for the podcast, subscribe over there. And then my Instagram, which is personal, is @Christine Dionese. And you get a good expansive of who I am and how I'm living my life. I'll be talking about all the things over there.
Yeah. And then final question, the Beautifully Broken podcast. What does it mean to you to be beautifully broken?
Oh, what does it mean to me to be beautifully broken? To just be humble and open and always embrace Shoshen, beginner's mind. You can never just be an expert. Just embrace beginner's mind, be willing to listen.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Stay Curious is going to be one of the first podcast t-shirts when I find the material that I want to print a t-shirt on. And I'm working on that right now.
I love that. Yeah, you need to write that book for sure.
Stay Curious.
Love
Awesome.
You. Thank you so much for having me on today. This is really fun.
Of course, we'll do more. We've joked that we've done like 20 podcasts by now because we have these conversations that just feel so on fire. And we'll do more. And I would always invite you whenever the inspiration rises to say, I need to talk. Let's hit record in the future because I think it'll be a value to everybody else. And are you going to any events this year? Any live things that you're going to be attending?
I literally have 0 things on the calendar right now.
Whoa.
Yeah. Can you believe that? I mean, I have obviously lots of stuff on the calendar, but no events, no trade shows right now. And that honestly feels really good. I was trying to force my schedule a bit and it wasn't working. So I had to take a step back and look at why that was going on for me.
Stunning. For the biohackers in the audience, I would love to know if you had a wand and you could just have any tools like in your home and you could build like a little is there a stack that you would throw together for yourself, for your family, or your community to have access to?
Absolutely. So
Met.
okay. Well, I'm kind of a minimalist. So this is what I find is the best for me and my people all the time, right? So start off with a nice juicy flow press. So I would have that setup going. And then I would jump into some EWA, do some oxygen, get going. If I was having a lazy day, maybe I would do some nano, kind of kick back and chill. But then I would love to do lumiceuticals, different multivarious lights along with amp coil. And then I would get a really good, juicy IV. Like that would be a good, I'm going to do this 3 days a week for me. And then everything else is a bonus. That's sauna is so basic that I don't even include it because I think everybody's saunas these days. But I guess I should mention how important that is too. We didn't have a whole podcast about Flowpresso, which we could have. One of my favorite tools ever. Anytime you're feeling any which way and you need to get out of your head and into your body, that is a really incredible quantum therapy. 20 minutes, even if you don't have too long, makes such a wonderful difference.
I found that to be true. Is there a reason why you did Flowpresso, which is a 3-in-1 technology, lymphatics, compression, nano frequency technology, thermodynamic heat, and then into the oxygen, and then into the light and magnetics? Is there a reason why you went in that order?
The original stack, the basic stack, that was created by Dr. Drobat, and he found that it is ultimate in helping prepare the body to receive, but also give you something in the moment. So for addressing root and branch, continually helping your nervous system and to get you ready to receive other therapies, but also something that you can walk out the door and go have an incredible day with for sure. I added in the lumiceuticals light therapy. I just found that that is so incredible. But what you're doing is you're obviously moving information in such a way that you are going to be able to have an intellectual response to it. So it prevents Herx responses and it meets you where you are. That's the intelligence of Flowpresso. And I love using that word, the intelligence of Flowpresso. Desiree, our friend, the creator, she always, when we ask her, well, what settings should we do for people? She'll answer with, well, where is this person on their journey? Are they strapping in for a ride in the race car? Or so I love starting off with that to kind of prime the nervous system to wake certain things up. And then you're feeding the body oxygen, right? You're feeding the cells oxygen. And then give them some amp coil, give them some PEMF, get those electrons doing their thing. And then obviously we're nutrifying from a methylation perspective with our personalized IVs. And I just do the light therapy according to whatever's going on in that person's life or my life. Maybe they need a little green light. Maybe they need a little red and green light together. So all of that together, it's waking up the body to receive a message it needs on any given day. That's the way I look at it. And I definitely thank Dr. Drobot for, he calls it the cell circuit. And then I just, of course, like any good biohacker, what they love to it.
I'm going to set that up. I have that here. It's funny. I've been doing the Brown's gas with Flowpresso because it's easy. It's a nasal cannula and you can stack it on. So it is electronically expanded water. It's oxygen. It's molecular hydrogen. And that's been a great stack, letting people run those together. And then if they want to get on the red light afterwards with the vibration plate, which the light path LED pulses all the Nogier frequencies. So I can set whatever I've had. I've had really good results on 40 hertz, especially people with any type of a concussion syndrome, post-concussive event in their lives. Really good. Three times through, just really different energetics.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear how that combination works in tandem with or better than putting someone in a hard chamber, for example. And I think a lot of that is just the nuance of personalization, meeting a person where they're at.
Yeah, I like the idea of the root or the tree being Flowpresso. Even in Ayurvedic medicine, it's always lymphatics first, which I'm really feeling into that right now. But the opportunity is that I have an EWAT here. I have 4 full body light panels. We have Flowpresso. We've got tons of amp coils. So we've been thinking about, my neighbor has just built out a 1,500 square foot backyard facility, and we've been thinking about running it once in a while. What would that look like for a community event? to just get people in on a Saturday and be like, hey guys, Saturday's cell circuit day. And just, you have to figure it out. What's that look like? Who's facilitating? How are you compensating those people? Because the thing that spins me out sometimes with all this is all the things we've talked about, they cost money and they're not super expensive, but I guess it's all relative. I'm like, oh, everything we mentioned is under hand. It's not that awful, but there are many people who are check to paycheck. So how do we bridge these worlds? Or is it through proving it out, mass adoption, that we get a trickle down effect and these things just start to become more affordable? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I shared this with you in conversation on the phone. One of my old clients who was working with me on a consultation by consultation basis back when I did that and I was switching over to Concierge, she said, I can really appreciate what you're doing, but it's kind of classist.
Yep.
And I was really triggered by that. Not upset with her, but I felt that initial, I need to prove to her that that's just not true. And so it took me a little while to think about what does the multiplier effect embodied really mean for me in the way that I'm attracting the particular clients that I am. So most of the clients that I work with, they're rather affluent. They are influencers. And I'm also blessed and in gratitude that they're very philanthropic. So they're embodying real change and they want to give back in a more meaningful way. So my work is collect all of these people and also guide them on how that they can give back. And so, yes, I think that mass adoption is obviously necessary because that drives down the cost because there is enough for everybody. So there's different ways to get to that point. But
Yeah.
when we're working with somebody who may have more financial resources than some others, it is really educating them on from a sociocultural perspective. These demographics tend to end up with rheumatoid arthritis, Lyme's, etc. And it's really a lot of incredible proof of epigenetics. Look at demographics. Yes, of course, someone who's affluent and wealthy can certainly develop a disease state that somebody else isn't. But when you're showing people how things are playing out socioculturally and they're getting to experience healing, if they are an ethical, heart-centered person, they're going to want that for everybody, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my clients have begun shifting their give, if you will, in a much different way and doing scholarships with the Marion Institute, for example. The Biomed
Mm-hmm.
Center just started a new 501c3 and they want to create a scholarship. It would be great to have these conversations with our more affluent clients more and more and more so that they understand, where everybody else is at, so to speak, so it's not classist and it's available to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've been wanting to bring that up on a podcast for a while, and I do believe you have to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
You can't just shame yourself into a little corner of inaction. We have to be led, and we have to listen to our heart when we're being called somewhere. But it is good to remind ourselves there's a way to get in, and I do think that, like you and in biological medicine, the readying of the terrain, the sleep hygiene, the insulin management, the daily movement, the mental, emotional, the spiritual practice, those are mostly free. And that's going to move the needle in a really big way. So I do think that is hyper accessible to the field. And that is not what kids are being taught in high school, in case you didn't know.
And just teaching our young kids that they deserve to receive and they can always, when they're obviously at the age to understand this, receiving and sharing and staying in gratitude and what that really means. I'm not a big Facebook person, but every single city has Buy Nothing Chi-Li, Buy Nothing Rochester, Buy Nothing LA, right? And Wegmans from our hometown. There are people that work there that distribute all of the almost expired organic food. And I was talking to a few people about this, and one of the girls, she said, I was feeling shame about accepting this food, and I should have been feeling gratitude, but nobody taught me what it even meant to feel gratitude. It was just an idea. And as soon as I learned how to feel gratitude, I started going over to my neighbors and just telling them about receiving. And when I told them about receiving, they started giving. So when we talk about this multiplier effect embodied in being in community, it's about feeling confident that you can share
Yeah.
to begin with. You know, there's so many little components of this. So for those of us who feel confident about being in conversation, it literally is about just talking to everybody that we can and asking questions and bringing more people to the conversation. I love talking to little kids. I've always, not that I've treated them like adults, but no baby talk involved. I want to know what they give meaning to and how they see their reality, et cetera. And I listen to how they're raised and the language that they're using and whatnot. I just knew with my daughter, I wanted to take her out in the community and to show her that there's nothing below or above. We're part of this system called humanity. And maybe some days we need to be on the receiving end of something. Most days will be on the giving end. And maybe that's just a smile, maybe that's a hug, being just giving the invitation, basically, that these things are possible. So I'm kind of going off on that whole thing of how we tell people and how we can lower the cost of things for people. But there's just so much more to share. There really is enough for everyone. And it's just being willing to walk out your front door and just go to your neighbor's house. A lot of people don't
Yeah.
even talk to their neighbors. So
I know.
I guess the exercise for today is, I don't know, go talk to 3 random strangers, go pop up on your neighbor's door with some herbs from your backyard, whatever you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. The guy that I'm working with here he's been in a bunch of car accidents, and he was talking about he's starting to have instances where he can't remember words and he wants to write a word in a sentence and it doesn't come. And he's like, this is really scary. It's happening more and more. And I just started to ask, I was like, well, when was concussion number 1? And he was like, well, and this one happened here. I'm like, and have you ever had these treated? Have you ever had this professionally looked at? And, of course the answer was no. And he said, listen, I can't promise you anything, but I've got this great full body light panel out here at 40 hertz, 20 minutes. I've got this great pulse electromagnetic device, 15, 30 minutes. And then I have a stethoscope, which is connected to an ozone machine, which is going to allow ozone to trickle down your auditory canal and get all this inflammation that could be up here in the neck. And I was just like, I think that stack could be profound. I don't want to tell you that it's going to heal you, because it's not. Your body heals itself. But why don't you just try 3 days? And he was like, Freddie's my sexual energy and my veracity, like I feel my male energy coming back. And he's like, I feel like this activation in my prefrontal cortex. And so he was like, I have this other friend and she's been in a car accident. Can she come here too? And I'm like, listen, as long as you guys can do a 30-minute onboarding and I can show you how, the door's open. So I can't run a clinic, but if it's somebody I trust and there's like a referral process and you understand what this is wellness. We can't promise anything. Get her over here. Let's try a week. And I think that without a pill, without a supplement, without a drug, the idea that we're just exciting electrons and activating the mitochondria, I see amazing results in a very short amount of time. So I'm excited to keep seeing I'm like, you ever seen Dumb and Dumber when they're driving around the big, of course you have, in the sheepdog wagon, and they're like, pick them up. That's what it's sort of becoming. So we will see. We will see. There's some, I've always said this, it's some community grassroots model. You don't need to open a center.
Community acupuncture that
Yes.
exploded, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's being done in people's living rooms or outside.
Yep. It doesn't need to be a center. It can be you're building a playground for people to come play with wellness. And it could be very accessible, and the shared burden of this cost could really be a solution for the thing that you and I have just talked about in the last 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
If you have 5 families paying in, right, it's nothing.
Well,
So no, you go.
I was just saying, I live in the South now. So what do people do? They're very into regenerative farming, and people do farm shares. People are buying in as groups, as communities. That's just how you do it here. So why can't we just stamp that onto everything we're talking about now? It's not that difficult. We already have the answer. You start talking to people about it more. You're the model.
Well, talking to people and telling the story. We just had a I know I've got to close down my own podcast. We just had a co-event that I helped produce, the grand opening of Central Health in East Austin, which is a center that they're going to be able to be guided through tailored biological medicine. But at the center also exists a cold plunge, a sauna, pulse centers, flow presso, light path LED, amp coils. It's all there for people to use. It just comes with the concierge service. And that's like, I'm pretty sure it's all day. You can just go and do these things. You can, it's really neat. And it was cool to see 80 people be at the opening, just from people like, they're very interested in it. And it was a big hit. So it's happening.
It is happening. I'm
It's
so
happening.
excited. I can feel it. I can see hearing about it. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, same. Well, have a beautiful day. We will talk again, and I celebrate you for the work you're doing and for being a guest on the Beautifully Broken podcast in season 6.
Thank you. Love to you, Freddie.